Last year, we covered a number of big-name investors' warnings regarding the future of financial markets. Many had quite a stark view, including George Soros Quantum Fund co-founder Jim Rogers. This past May, Rogers had such a dismal outlook that he warned a $68 trillion biblical collapse is poised to wipe out millions of Americans. Since then, the Dow has hit record highs above 20,000, and many other fragile bubbles continue to expand. And just this week, Jim Rogers did a podcast interview on Macro Voices in which he was questioned on a variety of topics. He didn't contradict any of his previous statements, though he certainly had opportunities to do so. Most notably, Rogers offered another warning statement saying, "Get prepared, because we're going to have the worst economic problems in your lifetime, and a lot of people are going to disappear." Jim went on to reference the demise of both Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, which were around for 90 years and over 150 years respectively. Both, despite surviving 2 world wars, still disappeared overnight, while days before, Jim Cramer on CNBC admonished that Bear Stearns was a buy at $62. 6 days later, it was bought out by JP Morgan for $2 a share.
Should I be worried about Bear Stearns in terms of liquidity and get my money out of there? No, no, no. Bear Stearns is fine. Do not take your money out. This is real. If there's one takeaway other than the plus 400 somewhere, Bear Stearns is not in trouble.
And Rogers thinks it's possible that many companies, and even countries, may soon no longer exist, just as Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers disappeared. Trump seems to have an inclination to start trade wars with China and Mexico, among other countries. Members of Trump's cabinet also are willing to comply with Trump's desire for war. A war would be a most destructive event at this point in time, but is certainly a possibility, as Rogers indicated. Rogers is bullish on the US dollar in the short term, but he points out the dollar's potential upside is not based on fundamentals, but rather on investors not knowing where else to place their funds. He mentions how despite many investors' perception that the dollar is a safe haven, it no longer is, and that will come back to hurt a lot of people. If the US dollar bubble continues to inflate over the short term the way Rogers expects, he anticipates that a number of countries and companies that are overextended in US dollars will go bankrupt as the dollar climbs higher and they're no longer able to service their debt. And he is certainly putting his money where his mouth is by encouraging people to buy gold on the dips. In fact, this is a move that is reminiscent of Stanley Druckenmiller's decision to enter back into his gold position. Rogers was very clear in this particular interview that he wants to own more gold and silver. He wants to buy it at a lower price and expects short-term corrections, which will allow him to do so. If you recall, Rogers has been a strong proponent of physical gold ownership for a while. He reaffirmed his admiration for the metal back in his 2016 interview with Barron's, where he told them, "If Trump does what he says he's going to do, such as wage trade wars, then it's going to be bad news for all of us. Trade wars have led to bankruptcy, and bankruptcy has often led to war. At that point, you'd better own a lot of gold." In light of Donald Trump's rhetoric of late, we completely agree with him. We're long gold and precious metals, as well as Bitcoin, which we still think is a massive buy. To get the best information on not only surviving, but prospering during the coming collapse, subscribe to the Dollar Vigilante newsletter at dollarvigilante.com/subscribe, where you'll be provided with specific recommendations, analysis, and steps you need to take to internationalize your assets. Also, join us for the TDV Internationalization and Investment Summit in Acapulco, Mexico on February 24th, where many of the world's top experts will give you their best analysis and advice on how to survive and prosper during this collapse. People such as G. Edward Griffin, David Morgan, GATA's Bill Murphy, Vic Swear, and many more. And being held directly after will be 4 days of Anarchapulco, the largest voluntarist and anarcho-capitalist conference in the world, from February 25th to 28th. We hope to see you there.
The world is going to be dramatically different in just a few short years. The European Union is fracturing, beginning with Brexit. Donald Trump is ushering in a new era of populism and protectionism. Government debt is wildly out of control. Numerous central banks have gone to negative interest rates in order to keep the system going just a little while longer. Capital controls are increasing, while the war on cash has been pursued with fervor in places like India and Venezuela. The World Bank, IMF, Bank of Canada, George Soros, Jacob Rothschild, and many more have warned that we are in uncharted waters and on the edge of collapse. Putting your money in a mutual fund and holding it for 30 years will not work anymore. Jeff Berwick has been warning of this since founding the Dollar Vigilante with Ed Bugos in 2010, and his calls have been epic. He was the first prominent financial commentator to tell his subscribers and the public to get into Bitcoin when it was $3 in 2011. It is currently $800.
What's your connection to Bitcoin?
My main connection is I'm incredibly excited about it. Bitcoin is a revolution in money and banking, the same way that the internet was a revolution in communication.
Ed Bugos has been one of the few to warn of the 2001 and 2008 crashes, and has been bullish on gold since its bottom in the year 2000. And together, they are holding their annual TDV Investment and Internationalization Summit this February in Acapulco, Mexico, to help you prepare for the crisis ahead. Last year at the TDV Summit, they warned of what was coming and gave advice that made attendees fortunes.
This is why we're at where we're at, central banking. Give a man a gun and he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he can rob everyone. And, you know, we all grew up watching old westerns and people would rob banks. That was the good old days, and now banks rob you.
Ed Bugos mentioned 3 stocks to buy. Agnico Eagle.
Agnico Eagle is run by one of the most experienced management teams in the industry.
And it rose 76.31% since. B2 Gold Corp.
B2 Gold Corp is responsible for discovering more than 30 million ounces of gold in their careers.
And it rose 248%. And Sabina Gold and Silver Corp.
Sabina is an emerging producer.
It then rose 147%. These are terrific calls, and this year you can expect more of them. Jeff Berwick and Ed Bugos will be surrounded with an all-star lineup of speakers, including author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin, who will discuss the state of central banking today. The world's most respected silver analyst, David Morgan of The Morgan Report. Bix Ware of RoadToRuta.com on discovery of the truth behind our massively manipulated markets, and to help expose those who threaten our free market system. Chairman of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, Bill Murphy, continues to expose the manipulation of the gold price by the gold cartel. Returning speaker Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, who recommended buying Bitcoin at last year's conference when it was below $400. It has since risen to over $1,000. Other speakers include Chris Casey of Windrock Wealth Management and Colin Cattell of Palisade Global, and many more. The TDV Internationalization and Investment Summit will be an all-day and evening event on February 24th, held in the 5-star Mundo Imperial Resort and Convention Center in Acapulco, Mexico. For the price of $395, you will spend an entire day with these experts, including an entire evening gala banquet with all food and drinks included. You can find more at tdvinvestmentsummit.com and register today because space is limited. And stay after the summit for the 4-day Anarchapulco conference with the world's biggest anarcho-capitalist speakers, investors, and entrepreneurs, including an entire day on blockchain, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrencies called Cryptopolco on February 28th. And for even more, Tone Vase will host a 2-day stock and cryptocurrency trading workshop after Anarchapulco called TDV Pro Trading Techniques on March 2nd and 3rd. It will be an entire week of activities, and it all starts with the TDV Internationalization and Investment Summit on February 24th. Register now.